Good morning.
Good morning, Beth. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 pandemic edition of Coffee Talk for Rare Disease Week in Washington, where we're not, but should be. Good morning.
Amen.
Good morning. Good grief.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you see, I don't know if you can see this, Eric. I'm drinking some coffee out of the Best Mom Ever mug because I don't have any Choroideremia mugs. But that gives me a brief moment, just a second before we get into it, to plug to everybody who's watching. We are going to be having a merchandise store, an online merchandise store coming up, and you'll be hearing more about it in the next few weeks. We're going to have shirts and swag and cups and pens and all sorts of fun stuff. So, although I am the best mom ever, only to myself.
Well, see, you've got that, and I've got my Funkle cup, because to my friends' kids, I am their Funkle. It says on it, just like an uncle, except really cool.
Excellent. Excellent. And I need to say right away too, I do have my jeans on. I have some jeans for Rare Disease Day. That's our fundraiser. So thanks to John Saloy and Kayla Schiller, who started that up and led it. And we're doing our Rare Disease Day thing, Eric.
Absolutely. And I'm actually, well, dressed up for Washington on the top. I've got my jean shorts on, so I'm good.
You're good. Good for you. Well, we're celebrating Rare Disease Week, not together in DC like we've done at the NIH so many different years, and doing our coffee talk. Right. I'm sitting here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in an office, and you're sitting in your home. So that's sad.
It is. I was going to wear the Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill scarf, but it's a little warm because it's actually going up to 80 degrees today in New Orleans. So no need for a wool scarf. But I do have, for the rest of the rare disease group, one of the things that they always say is rare is the no stripes on any zebra are the same. So that's why zebra stripes are also a symbol of rare. So I've got my rare zebra here, which is just a squinchy anxiety killer. Anyway.
There you go. You know, we had our mom's group, our mom support call last night, and it's great women. And anybody who's watching, if you want to be a part of it, it's the last Thursday of the month. We have anywhere between 5 and 10 people. We just have open dialogue with some subjects, topics usually. Sometimes we have a guest. But just let Corey or myself know, Beth Foss at curechm.org, and we'll get you hooked up with an invite there. But last night, the topic, one of the things that we were talking about that Laura brought up was, hey, what are we doing to advocate for our organization? What are we doing as a foundation to really push harder to get these treatments, you know, to the end, to the goal line, right? And so I said that we would be talking about that more today, about your extent. You are the director of advocacy. And for anyone that doesn't know this, when I go with Eric to these things, everybody knows Eric. You know, we attend various conferences. We go to symposium. You're doing a stupendous job, just amazing with your hat and your bow tie and that Southern gentleman thing. People know Eric and the advocacy that you're doing on our behalf. So let's take a few minutes and tell us what you've been doing and what our organization's been doing to help with rare diseases.
Well, part of the whole idea of advocacy is that we want to assure that government regulators and the legislative process are doing everything they can to advance the science. For choroideremia, our foundation has been at the cutting edge of that. We were early on, and that was in part thanks to Randy Wheelock. We ended up meeting with the CBER committee. CBER is an acronym. It's the committee within the FDA that reviews biologics for treatments, and biologics would include any of our gene therapies because they're delivered in a living cell. And one of the things we wanted to do for CBER, because they had only really for any gene therapy. They had seen only ushers, or not ushers, but LCA. We wanted to let them know what choroideremia was. So we actually had a patient requested meeting with all the members of their committee. And we had a full 2-hour meeting at the FDA. And that helped build the relationship with the regulators. And when you talk about, potentially me being recognized, when I go to these meetings, the members of CBER that were at that meeting still come up to talk to me about our eye disease, because we have ongoing trials. We have the new trial that just started with 4D Therapeutics, along with the other trials that are underway. And, it's just really important to be able to talk to them. Additionally, advocating also talks about the need to make sure the regulators are understanding the best endpoints for trials. And sometimes what researchers are thinking it's not exactly what we as a patient think are important. Some of you may remember that when we first started our trials, they were eliminating patients that had correctable vision to 20/20 because that sounds normal. And for many people, that is normal vision. But the problem with a choroideremia patient is we start losing our vision, our peripheral vision in childhood. And you could have correctable vision all the way until at 20/20, all the way into your 30s and 40s, or for me into my 50s. But by that same token, my vision had shrunk. And we wanted to make sure that when these trials are put underway, and especially in the phase 3 trials, that is eliminated, or indefinitely eliminated, as a criteria when the treatment is approved by the FDA, because we don't want people to not be able to get their treatment because they have 20/20 correctable vision, even though they've lost 50-60% of their entire vision to the sides.
Right. So this typically would be the time where we'd be bundled up. Some years really bundled up, right?
Exactly.
But they postponed it. So tell our audience what it means this year. What are some things that are on your task list that we're doing this week?
Well, it is a conglomeration, because the end of February is World Rare Disease Day. But with all these agencies, there are different events. The big event that would bring many thousands of these rare disease advocates to Capitol Hill is Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill. That is in person. And obviously with the pandemic, that didn't happen this year. So that has actually been postponed until the end of July. Excuse me. Strong coffee. But
what do you have in that coffee, Eric?
Chicory. No New Orleans imbibing. That's only on Mardi Gras Day. Thank you. That we have special coffee in the morning. But the other events, it's actually a full week of events. We had a wonderful event celebrating Rare Disease Week or globally with Retina International, and they had a wonderful Lifetime Achievement Award for 2 of the people that are cornerstones in the history of developing choroideremia research. And we could talk about that later. Yesterday, I participated in the U.S. Congressional Rare Disease Caucus, and this brings together representatives, senators, and their staff. And these are the people, it's really the staff that help put together the legislation, but certainly the congressmen and the senators are the ones that help drive it. And that's for rare disease legislation, advancing rare disease causes, including making sure the 21st Century Cures Act. We have making sure that we can get expedited approval, since we are rare. There's a lot of different ways that we can get some waivers to reduce the amount of patients that are required for trials. But then that was yesterday. Tomorrow, I'm actually invited to speak at Rare on the Road. This is the National Organization of Rare Disorders, and I'll be presenting choroideremia to the Louisiana delegation, both on the congressional level and for the state. And on Monday at the National Institute of Health,
Mhm.
and that is combined with their NCATS, and you got to love all the letters. NCATS is the National Center for the Advancing of Translational Sciences. And that really is the spearhead at the NIH for advancing rare disease. So they're having that meeting on Monday, on the 1st. And then on the 4th, I'm actually been invited to be a speaker at an open public meeting of the FDA on rare disease. So I'll be doing a very, very short talk along with a number of others, but that's for Rare Disease Week at the FDA.
That's super exciting. And I hope, whoever's watching this or joining us with their coffee or their wine later in the day. I hope that everybody knows that we are being very specific and being very intentful, if that's the right word, deliberate on what we're trying to do, and just always having a presence at these meetings. It's essential that we do that, right?
Absolutely. And, there are things that many patients don't realize are going on behind the scenes. And part of this is with government regulations and getting rare disease treatments approved, there is a huge new emphasis on the value and the costs of having a rare disease, because you're going to need to be able to justify that. And our patient population will be actually, they're going to see a couple surveys that we're going to ask them to participate in, which will be very, very important to have a measurement of what they call patient-oriented value and real-world data for that.
Mhm.
And that's going to be very important, when we do get treatments, to be able to go before the FDA to show them how important it is to get these treatments approved. Similarly, these surveys that are going to be coming up will also help us lobby to make sure that the FDA and the CBER committee and the other committees that would review potential treatments and trials will in fact work in a way that will emphasize helping us reduce the costs of rare disease. They need to know that it's not just a very simple thing. And so we're working on a number of levels with that.
That's pretty exciting. And one other thing that I wanted to jump in on that, I have a couple thoughts. I was jotting down some notes. Like you, I was asked to participate yesterday with Biogen. They had an internal call for Rare Disease Day, Rare Disease Week. 7,000 people. That was a little.
That's amazing.
That's a lot, right?
Wow.
So they actually, and in all transparency, only 449 showed up for the call. So it wasn't 7,000, but regardless, they were looking for caregivers and advocacy groups, and how they were kind of, the focus was on COVID and how COVID has impacted our population. But it was myself and then a woman from Romania with a rare disease called SMA. And then there was another woman from Colombia whose father had ALS. And then she was working with the ALS Foundation down there. So it was a great opportunity once again for Biogen, who everyone knows is one of our partners in a gene therapy trial, to know the patient perspective, not just the clinical, getting your eyes checked and the exams and trying to get a treatment done, but what is the impact and the emotional and psychosocial and relational aspects that COVID has had with CHM, and it puts a face, it puts the human behind the science, which really is important to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you were talking about there is the global nature of rare disease. Rare disease doesn't know any border, and it's certainly across the globe. And for choroideremia, that is one of the emphasis of the CRF, is to make sure we are also addressing the global needs. We are a member of Retina International. I have advocated and spoken at the UK gathering of ophthalmology genetic counselors, also for the genetic counselors here in the United States. I'll be attending the American Society of Gene and Cell Therapies conference later this year, which sadly is going virtual, but would have been here in New Orleans, and it was going to be combined and still is virtually with the International Society for Gene and Cell Therapy. So that's a way for us to address the needs of our international patient community. And, I think we should just really quick give a shout out to Retina International and their recognizing of Dr. Franz Kremer and Frank Bunzman. For those of you that don't know, back in the 80s, just when people were starting to figure out what DNA is and trying to map it out, there was a guy named Franz Kremer in the Netherlands that was beginning to do that work. He is an eye researcher, but his real passion is the genetics of eye disease. And he ended up thinking he knew somewhere in the gene where our mutation might be. And he got in contact with Frank Bunzman from Germany. And Frank was able to gather 10 vials of blood from 10 different CHM patients, including himself. And then he hand delivered that to Dr. Kremer. And from those 10 vials, Dr. Kremer was able to find the commonality of a mutation within those, and that became the means by which we have identified the choroideremia gene.
Wow.
And that was back in 1990. He won, or in the late 80s to 90, Dr. Kremer ended up winning a career grant that allowed him to travel. And he ended up going to Texas, where he ended up collaborating with a guy named Miguel Seabra and another young gentleman named Ian McDonald. Mm-hmm. And that was the dawning of what would later become the collaboration to make the CHM mouse, which we funded in 2000 and continued all through the early 2000s. And it gave us the footstep to begin to get our foot in the door for gene therapy.
That was a great little history lesson there. Cha-ching, that's great.
I mean, I was so excited because I had met Frank once, but I didn't necessarily know the full story of Frank actually going out and soliciting these samples and bringing them in. It was pretty extraordinary, and we are incredibly fortunate and thankful for Dr. Kremer's and Frank's work there, because it put us ahead of so many eye diseases. There are so many inherited retinal diseases that still are only now finding out what their genetic mutation is, or their, or I shouldn't say the genetic mutation, the gene that causes the problem,
right?
And the mutations within it.
And that's a really good opportunity to plug all the many people that are a part of this organization who've done fundraising, who've been diligent and involved in the foundation. Folks, for those of you that really want to, I know it's a hard year, right? This pandemic and COVID really has made people more isolated, and it's hard just to get up and go some days. But to get more involved in the foundation, we have so many opportunities for volunteering or attending committee meetings. If you want to know more about science, even if you don't know a thing about science, it's going to give you reassurance and just a sound foundation, thinking, okay, this is a good group. We have a great science advisory board. They're really doing their due diligence. They're working hard. We're getting closer and closer every month. And I think one thing I wanted to talk about, we discussed it again in the moms group, and it was an interesting, quick conversation. And Eric, maybe give me your thoughts on this, but the question was this: regarding COVID. We have these vaccines now that were rolled out in record time, right? Yet we've been working on treatments for choroideremia, and we have, 3 clinical trials going on right now. Why is it that we can't get to the end line, but they were able to get this to the FDA so quickly and get it approved and getting people treated? And of course we talked about that we're a rare disease of 1 in 50,000 people, and this pandemic, affects pretty much everybody. But we talked about how that process works in rare disease. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, because for rare disease, there are pathways, and we have been able to use those normally for any type of clinical trial. There's a phase 1, a phase 2, and then a phase 3. The
Mhm.
first one is usually, somewhere between 50 to 60 patients, and they're just trying to see if the treatment's safe.
Mhm.
Then they go to phase 2 or phase 3, and they are in the hundreds of patients in a normal trial to determine what the best dosage is. And then you go to the phase 3, and that's thousands. Well, if there are only 6,000 potential patients in the United States, if we're 1 in 50,000 globally, you can't use those big numbers. So with rare disease advocacy, we've been able to get it reduced because it just makes more sense. You can go slow with a smaller group. The difference with choroideremia versus something like the COVID is they have that virus. They can see it. It's there in the dish, and they can actually do treatments in a dish and say, okay, this thing kills it.
Mhm.
In the case of choroideremia, a gene therapy is correcting the error that is in the retina cells. That with our gene mutations of the CHM gene, it basically is causing a very slow death of the cells. It's with the protein that's created is like an Uber. It takes things in, it takes things out. And if you don't have that, the cell slowly weakens. And that's part of what also is, it's a lucky thing for people who have choroideremia that it is relative to other eye diseases and rare diseases. It's a very slow progression.
Mhm.
On the negative side, that slow progression means if there's a gene therapy treatment, we're going to have to wait longer periods of time to see whether or not the disease has stopped. So that's one of the things we've been advocating with the FDA, because there are newer measurements, ways of measuring the eyes, things like advanced optics, where they can literally see each individual cell. And if we can get those types of things approved, and certainly Dr. Jackie Duncan's presentation mentioned advanced optics, those kind of things are now at the forefront. And we are lobbying to make sure that the use of the most modern science and measurements are going to be included in clinical trials in order to help accelerate our eye disease treatments.
That was a good plug for Jackie Duncan. Anybody who wants to learn more about gene therapy, we interviewed Jackie this week, and it's going to be, I'm sure it is already, on our YouTube channel. It's on our website. There's a lot of videos there. So I think quite a few people are watching those. But she did a great PowerPoint presentation and talked that through. So check it out.
Absolutely. And, when we talk about advocating for the CHM community, one of the things we are really trying to emphasize is also understanding the disease. You'll be hearing more about a possible eye donor program, because there's still so much we don't know about the eye disease, and that'll be coming up in the future. But also understanding the pathogenesis, which is a lovely word to mean how does CHM progress? But it doesn't just progress in males, as it is commonly defined. It's predominantly male, but there are females that can be fully affected, It's rare, but female carriers can get symptoms.
Mhm.
And I want to emphasize that these surveys that will be coming up are not just for the affected males. We want the input, we want the measurements of what it means to be a female carrier of CHM, because we want that emphasized. We're working right now with one of our top researchers on our science advisory board to have a natural history study of just the female carriers, because we really want to be able to address everyone's needs. People may have heard of RNA therapy or neuroprotective agents. All these new cutting edge sciences are out there. And if we can better understand what the progression is, and let me tell you, when you get into the submolecular level in the retina cells, it's astounding to see how much further they can break down to these minuscule little proteins. And if we can figure out what proteins are falling away, there could be potential pharmaceuticals that might help enhance the cellular strength. And there may be things, hopefully, and that's what we're looking for, are ways to help even female carriers not develop, the symptoms that they may have in later life.
That's a really good point. And when we were talking with Biogen, we have weekly, so just for the folks to know, we have not weekly, monthly and sometimes quarterly meetings with our pharmaceutical partners. And so when we discuss these things with them, their ears go up and they want to know more specifically about the carriers, which I'm a carrier, right? And how we're impacted by CHM. And I think just going back real quickly to your point on, excuse me, on that donation. So I know some people, when you get your driver's license, you can check the box that says, yes, I'd be a donor, use my organs, use my eyes, for corneal transplant. This is something that's really important, and it's a hard discussion to have, whether it be with your aging parents or for you to make that decision. But we've talked to several of our researchers, and they said absolutely that donated eyes would be great for research from carriers as well as affected males. So
exactly, because I was going to say, because the only thing they can learn right now from us is viewing the eye from the outside. We're doing a lot in the laboratory with induced pluripotent stem cells. These were cells that were gotten from our patients, from our skin, and they isolate the stem cells that grow skin and induce those into becoming a stem cell, a pluripotent stem cell that can grow literally CHM retina cells in a dish. But that's still not, that's only one part of the understanding. Then, as we said, with advanced optics and things like that, they literally are only just now being able to view individual cells. Before they could take pictures in the back of the eye, and many of us that have had those photos taken, you see the veins and the red area and a not red area. But with these new measurements, they can look at the individual cells. And it's going to be those measurements that are going to be able to help us. But to actually have the donation of an eye, they would be able to look at the actual cells. And there's a lot that can be learned. So keep your eye out. That program is going to be coming soon.
And, I learned something, in developing or being a part of these conversations within the leadership and the people who are heading it here, is that even, I hope it doesn't sound too more morose, but even, I think Eric, you told me this, that when someone passes away, they prepare the body for viewing. They usually take the eyes out anyway. Right. So it's
in many cases. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, let's move off that topic because it's kind of sad. It's Friday and
exactly.
Maybe here, I think, are there any other topics, anything else we got to cover, or are we good?
I think we're good, though. I will say, when people are asking what we're advocating for, because of our contacts with trying to get the outreach out there, with people like the genetic counselors that work with specifically ophthalmology patients. As some of you may have seen on our YouTube channel, we had a nice presentation by the FFB explaining their free genetic testing program, and that offers genetic counseling. But because of my contacts with the American group and the international group, coming up in the next several weeks, I'm going to be recording an interview and getting a presentation from an actual genetic counselor explaining what it means to get genetic testing, because it's so incredibly important. Every single CHM patient needs to get tested, because with these new therapies that are coming out, you will need to know what your specific genetic diagnosis is. And if it's mRNA therapy, that'll be specific to the type of mutation. And there's 50 or so documented mutations of the CHM gene. I don't want to get into a lot of science, but they know there's the gene, but there's about 50 or plus ways that it could get screwed up to where, we have choroideremia. So, I mean, there's a lot coming. And I just say kudos to CHM researchers, but also to this foundation, because here we are in this pandemic, and literally 1 year ago, we were just finishing up a training of our Choroideremia Research Foundation staff on a new multimedia platform that would allow us to do better outreach to our patient population. And it was something none of us had heard of. It was called Zoom. And suddenly the pandemic hit, and we were able to pivot as quickly as possible to give you patients out there as much content as we could without meeting in place. So, kudos to the leadership for securing that grant over a year ago to make sure that we were ready to pivot immediately to make sure that we do this outreach.
The online presence is so important.
Yeah, because remember, our coffee talks were basically on Facebook Live at that point.
Right.
No editing involved. So anyway, I just think it's been great. Another lovely chapter of Coffee Talk. If anyone wants any more information or has questions, feel free to contact me or Beth. Our contact information is available at curechm.org, or obviously talk to Corey or any of our leadership, and we'll be happy to talk to you. But Beth, I don't know, is that everything now for Coffee Talk?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. And if anybody would like, to give us any feedback on these, if you would like to see these more frequently, if there are certain topics that we could be talking about, interviewing different people, just casually like this and not having it a formal webinar, we're always looking forward to doing different things. So I switched, Eric. I switched from my coffee, which is now empty, into my vitamin water in my Cure CHM water bottle. Merchandise.
Nice.
Eyes open. We'll be selling these.
There you go. All right. Well,
swag from our conference that did not happen. So and just to make sure everybody understands, we are not going to be having a conference this summer. Very unfortunate. We're going to be putting it out one more year. There's some talk internally. The board is meeting this weekend. There might be some regional things happening, but it's really contingent upon how this thing's going down with COVID.
And we hope to get together with everybody as quickly as we can, because nothing is greater than sitting down with CHMers. Whether it's regional meetings here in the United States. We had a fabulous one in England last over a year ago now because of COVID in November, and certainly internationally with the German meeting, our good friends with Franz Kremer. Everybody wanted to get together, and they had a meeting, but it ended up being virtual. And the French literally couldn't cross the border last year to get to the meeting. So soon, hopefully, we will all actually be able to get the vaccines and be able to meet once again. So I think that's it for our coffee talk.
Coffee Talk
Coffee.
2021. Thanks everybody
Thanks, guys.
thanks for joining
right.
us. And we look forward to doing it again in the near future. Have a great weekend. And thanks for your contributions one more time for the rare fundraising that we're doing for Rare Disease Week. Wear your jeans, post on social media, and get your friends and family. Eric.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Have a great
Cheers.
day. See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.